Even if we're only 2 decades into the 21st century, there have been countless unsolved mysteries, disappearances, and crimes left unresolved from this century. These are 5 of the creepiest unsolved mysteries of the century so far. Number 5. Atlantis was created by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato as part of a thought exercise, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to find the supposed sunken city for millennia, with everything from the Eye of the Sahara to the coast of Japan being suggested as possibilities. However, in 2001, a group of surveyors came across what appeared to be the ancient ruins just off the coast of Cuba. The structures were first found by marine engineer Pauline Zalitsky and her husband, Paul Weinzeg, a Canadian couple who ran a seafloor surveying company. The company was one of a handful working with the Cuban government to survey the waters around the island, looking in particular for treasures from the age of exploration and the Spanish conquest. The sonars picked up a series of odd images on the seafloor. Most of the area they had searched was empty plains, but there appeared to be symmetrically organized stones and geometric shapes on the seafloor. While it wasn't impossible for these to have occurred naturally, it was unusual enough for them to return months later with a researcher from Cuba's National History Museum and a state-of-the-art remote control vehicle which could examine and film the structures. The machinery captured huge blocks of granite stone, some appearing to be shaped into pyramids, others stacked one on top of the other, and some isolated from the rest. It really did seem like a sunken city, but the scientists weren't willing to jump to any conclusions. Once word of the discovery got out, newspapers around the world were talking about Cuba's Atlantis. While many brushed it off as another hoax, experts wanted to take a closer look. Some estimated that the structures would have been built about 50,000 years ago to have been able to sink in their current location. This would mean the formation is almost definitely natural, but the structures may have been built more recently and disappeared beneath the waves due to a large earthquake. Despite the initial interest from universities and publications like the National Geographic, there's been little new research in the area, leading some conspiracy theorists to declare a cover-up. Experts claim there simply wasn't enough evidence to warrant further research. Number 4. In October of 2000, Pakistani authorities made the discovery of a lifetime when they caught a man trying to sell a Persian mummy on the black market. The seller told police a friend had found the mummy after a recent earthquake and he'd agreed to sell it and split the profits. When he led police to where the mummy was being kept, they found what was believed to be the most important archaeological find in centuries. The mummy was sealed in a carved stone coffin inside of a wooden sarcophagus. She was wearing a gold mask and crown, and her body was discovered with golden artifacts. Like the typical Egyptian mummies, her internal organs had been taken out after death, and she was bound in cloth. An inscription on the mummy's breastplate read, "I am the daughter of the great King Xerxes. Mazurka, protect me." This was the first time a Persian mummy had been discovered. It was thought only ancient Egyptians purposefully preserved their dead in such a fashion. Closer inspection led many to believe the mummy didn't actually belong to a princess. Parts of the process typical in Egypt had been skipped, and the grammar on the breastplate was not how it should have been for a child of King Xerxes. The inscription had probably come later, it was decided, by the sellers trying to make even more money. However, it was still believed to be an authentic Persian mummy, likely from 2,600 years ago, still an incredibly valuable find. The mummy was brought to the National Museum, and tensions rose between Iran and Pakistan over the treasured find, but it soon emerged there was more forgery than just the breastplate inscription. Scans and chemical testing found that the substance that had been used to fill the space left by her organs was made up of modern drying agents, like bicarbonate of soda. Carbon dating found the woman had only died 4 years ago, and CT scans revealed the cause of death to be a broken neck caused by blunt force trauma. Pakistani authorities opened a murder investigation, and the people who had originally claimed to have found the mummy were investigated. Unfortunately, the identity of the woman remains unknown, and she was reburied in 2008. Number 3. Elk Weaver disappeared after leaving for work at a hospital on December 9, 2010, and hasn't been seen or heard from since. Elk was 32 years old at the time of her disappearance and was working as an executive secretary at a hospital near where she lived with her boyfriend in Belgium. Usually, she would ride a bike to work, but it was exceptionally cold that morning, and Elk had arranged for a coworker to pick her up from a nearby intersection. The plan had originally been to meet at around 7:30 a.m., but her coworker was running late. At 7:31 a.m., the coworker tried to call Elk to inform her, but she didn't pick up. 7 minutes later, the coworker received a text from Elk saying she was feeling sick and had decided to go home. The wording of the text seemed off to Elk's parents, and it's not clear whether or not she was the one that sent the text, but at the time, her coworker thought nothing of it and went to work. Elk didn't return home. She was last seen on CCTV at a convenience store at 7:29 a.m. She was at the intersection she was supposed to be meeting her friend, but she didn't wait for too long. To return home, Elk would have had to have turned left, but instead she turned right and disappeared off camera. It's possible she just wanted to walk around the block rather than retrace her steps, but she may not have intended to go home at all. The coworker who was supposed to pick her up disputes whether or not this was actually Elk, giving the possibility that she may have not been the one at the intersection that morning. Elk's boyfriend, who also worked at the hospital, left for work a little earlier than she did and didn't see her come home. He didn't realize she hadn't gone to work until the coworker texted him to let him know she was feeling ill and had gone home. When he finished his shift, he found that the flat where they lived was empty. After trying and failing to reach Elk on her phone, he contacted her parents and then the police. Since the disappearance, there have been multiple leads, but none have ever brought investigators closer to finding her. According to friends and family, Elk had been paranoid about someone following her shortly before her disappearance, but she also suspected her boyfriend of cheating on her. Apparently, she'd left work early multiple times to try to find evidence on his computer, and some have suggested that this was the real reason she never returned home. A neighbor who moved to the area shortly after the incident was charged with taking the life of an elderly man 2 years earlier, and police investigated whether he was involved in her disappearance, but no evidence has been found to connect him. Other possible suspects include her boyfriend and a local laborer who bought a refrigerated meat truck and drove it to France just after Elk disappeared. Number 2. Gareth Williams was a Welsh mathematician and codebreaker who worked for the British intelligence organization GCHQ as a communications officer. In the summer of 2010, he left his post, headed for London, where he would take his annual leave. Despite being a very private person, he kept in touch with his colleagues while he was away, until he abruptly stopped. When they hadn't been able to get in contact with him for several days, police were sent to conduct a welfare check on August 23rd. Officers found Williams' body inside of a padlocked holdall in the flat's bathtub. He'd been dead for about a week, and the exact cause of death could not be determined, despite 2 separate examinations. Oxygen depletion, or buildup of carbon dioxide inside of the bag, was likely to blame. An extensive inquest got underway. It was possible for Williams to have gotten into the bag and zipped it up himself from the inside, but experts determined it would be impossible to have sealed the padlock without damaging the bag, and there were no fingerprints belonging to Williams found anywhere on the bath that he was in. Williams wasn't known to be a risk taker, and would always avoid risks if possible, so it seemed unlikely he would have willingly got inside of the bag for his own amusement. At the same time, there were no signs of a struggle, and Williams apparently looked peaceful when he was found, giving rise to the possibility he could have been unconscious at the time. There are between 10 and 15 traces of DNA in the flat, some completely unexplained, but none provided enough evidence that someone had entered the flat, attacked Williams, and left him in the bag. Some members of his family claimed that the area had been wiped clean after the attack, but investigators concluded that this was unlikely. An inquest eventually found the death was unnatural and likely criminally meditated. However, a later police investigation came to the conclusion that this was probably an accident, a conclusion the family rejects. It's been speculated the death may have been the result of his work at GCHQ, something the organization completely denies. Given the nature of his work, it's unlikely the truth of the matter will ever be known. Number 1. 19-year-old Jason Gilkey went missing on his way to meet a coworker on June 13, 2001. What makes Jason's case particularly eerie is the short time frame Jason had in which to go missing, and the complete lack of suspects has left police baffled. Jason worked at a Fazoli's restaurant near where he lived in Omaha, Nebraska. He would usually drive to work, but with his car being at the mechanic's, he had to make arrangements for a coworker to pick him up from the local school. It shouldn't have taken Jason long to walk to the school. He only lived 8 blocks away. He left his home at 10:45, hoping his brother bring their bins back to the curb before heading off. About a half an hour later, Jason's coworker called the house phone to ask where Jason was. He wasn't at the school when she arrived. Jason, of course, wasn't home. At first, his younger brother decided to play a joke and pretend to be him, but he quickly realized that something serious had happened. CCTV from the school showed Jason had never arrived at the pickup point. He'd disappeared, either intentionally or not, at some point during the 8-block walk. His family believed it was unlikely Jason would willingly disappear. He was set to start a new job in a week's time and was really looking forward to it. He was also studying a subject that he was passionate about. There was more than $600 in Jason's bank account that hadn't been touched since his disappearance, and it seems unlikely he would have just left it there if he was planning to run away for whatever reason. Jason also had no known enemies, and police have never been able to identify a suspect. It's possible the entire situation was the result of a tragic accident, such as a hit and run, where a panicked driver took and disposed of Jason's body. Alternatively, a case of mistaken identity has been suggested, or the possibility that he was the victim of an unknown serial killer. But it seems unlikely nobody would have seen or heard anything in such a populated neighborhood in the middle of the day. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.